Okay, so these are my suggestions for nature books to read. And this one, I've started this one. It's fabulous. I have a whole stack of science, nature, literature. And of course, this is nonfiction. So this one is Whispers of Rock, Stories That Stone Tells Us About Our World and Our Lives. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name because I know I'm going to tear it up, and I don't want to do that because I'll feel really bad. She's British. She is a geologist, and oh my goodness, this book is one of those books I think that's going to stay with me for like a long time after I read it because she talks about rock formations all over the world that are famous, like Stonehenge. And I've seen Stonehenge, and I have a piece of Stonehenge that they sell little pieces, not a piece of the literal Stonehenge, but the blue stone that actually comes from wells. They sell that in their little gift shop if you go and you see Stonehenge. And I should have worn it. I have a little pendant of it, but it's so very magical. And I have a pendulum that's made of bluestone as well. So I may bring that and show that to you guys since a lot of us have been hiking and we've been talking about stones and geology and time and the mysticism that surrounds the folklore of the indigenous cultures around stone. And the ones that really, really appreciate stone are the cultures that are the indigenous, I guess, traditions that really intrigue me. And this is anthropology. It's philosophical. It's slow reading. It's beautiful. It's about rocks. It's about stones. I should do a video where I should invite people over and we should just look at my stone collection because I actually have a pretty cool stone collection. But this, if you love nature and the things that we just ignore, like we ignore rock. So she's going to go into the environmental science part of ignoring rock, like the cost of things like fracking and pipelines and stuff like that. Um, so that's going to be covered in here as well. But this is a good book, and so I'm taking my time reading it. She's an earth scientist. She talks about everywhere from Ethiopia to New Zealand. She covers the churches that are made of rock in Ethiopia that have been there for centuries. They're just carved into the caves. I think they're Gnostic churches, but it's really interesting. If so many spiritual places are built on stone and rock, and we don't really think about that. You think about like this, what was it, the stone in Ireland that they used to crown all the kings on? It's this famous legendary stone. So this is like, yes, this is definitely, I don't order from Amazon, but I couldn't find this book anywhere else. It had just been published, and I actually made an exception because we had to get something for the cats. So I did buy this book on Amazon. I'm going to be honest, but we we don't normally do that. We try to avoid Amazon at all cost. As I usually tell people, go to the book outlet because most of these books I get from the book outlet, and I just find random books just by looking on the book outlet. So the Arrogant Ape. Now, this is a recently published one that I got from Walmart. Not the Walmart in town. I had to order it. I couldn't find it anywhere, and it was better priced than going through Barnes and Noble. I should have probably gone through Burning Books. Burning Books is a bookstore in New York, and they're really cool. There's also another bookstore out of Minneapolis called Milkweed Books. They're a publishing house too, and I've spoken to them, and I'm about to do an order from them because they're really nice. We were talking about moving up there, and they were one of the resources that I had asked about the area. So I've kind of gotten to know that bookstore a little bit. The Arrogant Ape by Christine Webb. This is basically a takedown, as it says right here, of human supremacy, of how we feel like we got opposable thumbs. We can do it all, and we know we can't now. We are destroying the planet. That's what we can do with our opposable thumbs. We can destroy the planet with a man made apocalypse, and that's exactly what we're doing. So basically, it critiques Darwin, how he thought that humans, we were some kind of apex of creation, which we know is bullshit. And we know that other animals now have consciousness. So it really challenges that thought if you're really into studying speciesism, about how there are so many people who think humans are the end all be all. And you see this all the time when we talk about loss of habitat and other peoples losing their habitat, about what the indigenous North Americans would call the first people were the animal people, and their tribes like losing their natural habitats. And we think about how we blame what we call invasive species. And I'm going to go off on a tangent. This is a soapbox. Just deal with it. So, for instance, cats, feral cats. I keep all my cats indoors because there are coyotes out there, but I love them anyway. I wouldn't let them out. But the point is, feral cats are blamed for songbirds disappearing, when that has actually been debunked by scientists, by actual fucking scientists that study animal behavior, because songbirds are dying. Pesticides. And what's the second? Or really the Thai habitat loss. We don't have meadows anymore. We get rid of our wetlands and our meadows. And that's where those birds breed. I mean, when we went birding last Saturday at the water park, how the cormorants come every year and they roost in those trees backside of the mall. Now, since I've been here, I've seen fluctuations in the migration because I've been watching it every year of different species that come down. And that has to do with whether it's a really rainy season or it's colder or it's warmer. We are changing the planet. We are moving the migrations of birds. Oh, and also, guess what? Another thing that's killing birds, songbirds, because they migrate, light pollution at night, light pollution in those big skyscrapers. You know how many birds, I mean, millions of birds lose their lives flying into that shit. But we got to build it like the Tower of Babel because we think we're going to make it to the heavens. So, those three things, light pollution at night or light pollution in general, habitat loss, and pesticides. Pesticides are horrible because if it's not directly killing the birds, it's killing their food source, it's killing the insects they eat, it's killing beneficial insects as well as the ones you don't like mosquitoes. Pesticides are not good. Okay, so, and I just went on a tangent because I had to take up for my people. But the arrogant ape, I have not started this book yet, but I got it just last week, and I'm going to read this book next after I finish Whispers of the Rock. So I don't like humans. I think humans are pretty, stupid myself, but whatever. So this book right here that I'm going to tell you about, The Anthropology of Turquoise, changed my life. This book changed my life. I don't know what that means. I just said it. But I mean, I do know what that means. It changed the way, okay, it changed my life in regards to how I look at nature literature. Like every book that comes after this book has to be on par with this book. Okay, that's how. I'm goofy. So basically, this is about the desert, and everyone knows my infatuation with the American Southwest, like all of it. In particular, New Mexico and Arizona. This takes place mostly in like Utah, but it's still the desert. And she basically, I'll just read the back, but Ellen Malloy actually died of an aneurysm in the early 2000s. So her last book was in process and was finished by her husband. And they were both like park rangers, river rangers, or he was a river ranger and she was an essayist and writer. So they basically lived in a cabin out in the Sahara Nevada, the Mojave Desert. And she basically covers the Sahara Nevada, the Mojave Desert, and talks about, in conjunction or in contrast rather to these places, how the Bahamas are different, because she goes on vacation to the Bahamas and she talks about the element of water, how water did create the desert at one time. Like the Grand Canyon was carved by water running through it. So, and of course that took thousands, millions of years, but it happened. So I have a story about that in a minute, but I digress. So this is a book about life, like observing nature. It starts with the color turquoise, and it talks about the turquoise stone, and then it talks about nature, basically, in a very poetic prose that uses humor because she has some funny stories of where she's out in nature and just she talks about running into this weird group of Christian men who were camping. And so there are some there's a lot of funny parts in here, but also how nature brushes up against like the quirkiness of human life, like just running into random roadside cafes out in the desert. So yeah, this was one of the best books I've ever read. And this was one of her first books she wrote, and I have not read this one. I bought this on Pango. It's called The Last Cheater's Waltz: Beauty and Violence in the Desert Southwest. And this is going to be another one about the desert, and I'm just really excited to read it. I've been putting it off because I want to save it because she's not here. She's not with us anymore. She's deceased. She was I think young in the 50s, like a kid in the 50s and a teenager in the 60s. So she's seen the product of changing climate and what it was doing even back then. But she has a really interesting take on life. Her philosophy of life is really cool. I guess when I say this book changed my life, that sounds like so like Valley Girl and shit. Like, okay. So when I say this book changed my life, it really made me rethink. It really made me rethink some of my priorities, right? Like it really made me rethink like American consumerism. It really made me rethink like my personal style, which I really don't have personal style to be honest. I did when I was younger. You know, they call it, you know, it's practical magic. I wore sundresses and shit a lot, but it was the 90s. But I've never had, and she doesn't either, which is good because I don't give a shit about fashion. I've never been a handbag bag person or a shoe person. So it's really good to see somebody who has the same values that I have, but she was able to just not be bullied or not let it, her mindset was different from mine, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. So I guess that's how I mean that this changed my life. It made me rethink some of my past and where I wish I had handled things differently, or I wish I had just not given a shit, you know, because she was in a position where she was able not to give a shit, where I had to at times. So maybe that's not my fault. Maybe it is. I don't know. And this is again the one I bought in Pango that I'm going to read next. So yeah. Um. So you've heard of braiding sweetgrass if you've read any natural or nature literature, any nonfiction. This is A Serviceberry Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass. If you have not read Braiding Sweetgrass, oh my goodness, you need to read it. Because it was another one like Ellen Malloy's book, The Anthropology of Turquoise, that really did make me think. And it made me, because at that time I was into growing vegetables and thinking about reciprocity to the land and the Three Sisters process of growing vegetables. It really made me think about even things that my father and grandfather had done that, you know, I wouldn't do as someone like growing native pollinator plants here. So the serviceberry basically is her recent one. It's accessible because it's so thin. It would be a fast read. I have not read this. This is another one I got from the book outlet. But again, her braiding sweetgrass. If you find it on something like Audible, I wouldn't use Spotify. So I'm just gonna say Audible, which I know is Amazon. It's so hard to get away from those places. If you listen to her voice, like she's a member of one of the indigenous tribes in New England, and I'm blanking on which one, but she has the most soothing voice. I mean, the most. Listen to her interviews. Oh my God, she did an interview with Bjork. It wasn't for NPR, but it was with for a podcast or a radio show that's a lot like um, NPR. Some of their programming. I'll have to link it or something, but she did an interview with, she and Bjork talked about reciprocity and stuff, and it was just a really great interview. It also talked about the stones in Iceland and the spirits that live in the stones. So yeah, it, this is cool, and it's cool to talk about like in conjunction with the Whispers of Rock book and reciprocity, and really look at how, you know, from an animistic point of view, how the energy of the life and all of this is interconnected. It's just I don't really have the words for it, and I should though because I'm an English teacher, but I don't. The mushroom at the end of the world, on the possibility of life in capitalistic ruins. And this is going to be one that basically I got this for Brian. I got this from Walmart when I ordered the Arrogant Ape because I was on this journey to see how what the natural world can tell us about what we're doing. Like what the fuck, you know what I'm saying? So the mushroom at the end of the world, it talks about how mushrooms come in and heal. You know, we think of fungi as being a poison, but it's also in Greek it's called pharmakon, which is where the word philosophy comes from, and it means basically it's a plant or species that heals a flora, and fungi is not, they're not plants. They're their own kingdom, or a fungi that heals, but it also poisons. So it can be the healer or the destroyer, depending on how you use it and how much you take. Alice in Wonderland. So, and that's a good metaphor. But yeah, this is something I haven't read, but it basically it talks about it's going to talk about the Japanese mushrooms, the capitalist traders of Japanese mushrooms, where there's several types of mushrooms that are considered delicacies, but it also talks about Finnish nature guides in Finland, and it leads us into fungal ecologies and forest histories across the world to better understand where we're going. Because usually after destruction of natural habitat, it's interesting to see what kind of fungi pops up. And last time we were hiking, we were just talking about the ghost pipes, how the ghost pipes will come out on Drift Mine and Watley after a really rainy year, after a rainy winter. So they'll show up in the summer sometime, I think early summer. So yeah, I have not read that one, but that was one that I had had on the list for a minute and decided to just go ahead and get. So these are all book outlet books that I found on Book Outlet, just looking at nature under their nature category and their philosophy. So this is meets philosophy, meets environmental science, meets nature writing. It's called Shape, the Hidden Geometry of Information Biology, Strategy, Democracy, and everything else. So it's going to kind of coalesce like everything I've been talking about into one book, which kind of blows my brain a little bit. But I'll just read the back of it. And this sounded so interesting. Shape sounded so interesting about the geometry of nature. I guess also fractals. And I'm dyscalculate, so me reading this is going to be a feat. But because I was actually never allowed to take geometry because I was so bad at math that I was not allowed in high school to take geometry. And then I left high school at the end of my sophomore year and started college, what would have been my junior year. So I missed out on a lot of math. I was dyscalculate anyway, so it's not like I would have gotten it. But it's interesting going back and reading the mathematical concepts in nature literature because I never had them. For many, geometry is a sterile and dimly remembered exercise left in the dust of ninth grade. I wasn't allowed to take it, along with braces and active romance interest in pop singers. But the stuff of math textbooks has little to do with the far-reaching implications of modern geometry. That's good. Which Shape reveals with Ellenberg's trademark humor and expertise. Geometry seen through Ellenberg's eyes has a joyous magic that's its own reward, but is also a powerful tool for preventing pandemics, saving democracy, or achieving clarity of thought. Swinging effortlessly from the question of how many holes a straw has to the pivotal contributions and personal quirks of geometers throughout time and space to the spooky power of the Markov chain, Ellenberg shows us how geometry not only measures the world but explains it. So that's the back of this book. And I know that's pretty crazy that someone dyscalculate gets a book on fucking math, but I'm ever curious. And like I said, I was never allowed to take geometry, so maybe I can understand it. I don't know. So this is written by a neuropsychologist. And neuropsychology really interests me because it's supposed to be better than like psychology in general because it's more science-based in the different parts of your brain. Whereas psychology is kind of, dated. Freud, anybody? So the darker the night, the brighter the stars, a neuroscientist's odyssey through consciousness. So this is about consciousness. I'm sorry, a neuropsychologist journey or odyssey through consciousness. This is about consciousness, and I don't know what to think of this book because I have not read this book. This is again just one. I know I haven't read a lot of these, but I just got this in the book outlet. And he talks about Schopenhauer, another philosopher, the Greek philosophers. So he talks about how everything is interconnected, the logic, the nuance, the scientist's understanding of the mind, how we think about what makes a person, a poet's, think about the poet's approach to humanity. All this shit is in there. And I'm excited to see this subject, like about the brain and consciousness. I think of it through, I think of it through an animistic perspective because I'm an animist. And this is where I'm going to talk about the word atheist. Not necessarily in here, okay? I don't know if the word atheist is in here. I haven't read this book yet, disclaimer. Atheist is just a negation, okay? That is the mechanical situation of that word. A is a prefix. The prefix simply means without or lacking. So putting a in front of theist means lacking or without a god. Okay, so that's all that word means, atheist. There's a lot of people that put a lot on that word or that term, and it's kind of heavily loaded. So it's not a term I'm using currently, but I think it would be interesting to have atheists, like the hardcore dude bro atheist. You think of the Sam Harris guys, the ones that showed their butt all over the interwebs back in 2015. It would be interesting to have those motherfuckers read about consciousness and what neuroscientists are discovering with consciousness. Especially now, since we know the octopus and squids, they have a form of consciousness, which is why, since they are conscious, in a lot of the Nordic countries and European countries, it's illegal to hunt and eat octopuses now. And yes, the plural is octopuses, okay? It's not octopi, it's octopuses because it's a Greek word. I hate it when people correct me when I say octopuses, when they don't fucking know, because they didn't look up the etymology, they didn't look up the goddamn word, but they're going to correct you because they think it's octopi. It's octopuses. I read one book that was fantastic, and I gave it to a friend. It's called The Consciousness of the Octopus, or something like that. That it starts with that sentence that I just said. It is octopuses. It's not octopi. Okay. Tangent done. But I would like to see a lot of these shithole atheists fucking read some of the stuff about consciousness, because these dude bro men atheists are fucking just as bad as evangelical Christians or New Agers. They are. I mean, can we just throw them all in like a big rocket and send them up somewhere into outer space? With space trash. But we don't want them in orbit. And I'm totally joking right now. Seriously, I wish we could do that with a lot of our problems, but we cannot. So this is from Alan Lightman, a physicist. And I've read his books before. I've read a couple of his books. He also wrote Einstein's Dreams, which was published in the 90s. It's a little novella. You've probably heard of it if you're a reader. You've heard of Einstein's Dreams. Brian actually met Alan Lightman. He actually met Alan Lightman in graduate school when he was working on his doctorate. I think it was somewhere in Europe. He can tell you the story. I cannot. It's not my story. The miraculous from the material, understanding the wonders of nature. Now, Alan Lightman is one of those physicists that is not a dude bro. He actually has this really awesome, almost, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but almost like animistic sense of wonder at the universe, like the living universe. And it's not about human ego, and it's not about, oh, gee, I need to find, some kind of human meaning, which philosophy does struggle to do. Philosophy can be very arrogant. This is why I like philosophy and I don't like philosophers. But when you get into physics, in a certain type of physicist, the way they think, they're not looking at it from an angle of human centric. They're looking at it from everything. And that's hard to parse out. And that's a conversation that you'd have to have with Brian, not me, because I'm not the physicist. He is. So I'm really interested in reading this book because it has all these beautiful pictures and it's broken down and really accessible, like lightning. It has a section on lightning where it talks about lightning, fireflies. And when I say magic, I'm talking about the natural magic. And if you're a witch, you get it. If you're not, you may not get it. And it talks about the aurora. He spelled it aurora. So yes, I'm not mispronouncing that either. So yeah, or aurora. He said aurora because I guess that's the plural. And hummingbirds, the Grand Canyon. So I had to show you the inside of this book because it's not what you would think. It's really not. And this is the kind of book that, you can sit on your nightstand, Saturn's rings. This is my favorite planet. So I have it tattooed right here. And your middle finger, interestingly, is called your Saturn finger, FYI. So yeah, this is this is the kind of book you could set on your nightstand and just read a little bit before you go to bed if you have to read something heavy in order to get sleepy. So yeah, it works for me. These are all the science, literature, philosophical books. Some are more philosophical than others, but these are all those texts. And I have a few fiction books for the book club that I would recommend. You can read whatever the shit you want to read. You asked for ideas, so I'm giving you all ideas. So I have a few of those I'm going to get and bring in here, and I'll just tell you what is on my TBR list for fiction and what I've already read. Okay, I'll be back.